Hi guys, Johnny Good here for realhomestudio.com. Today looking at 3 top tips for tracking real instruments with MIDI instruments. Let's roll the titles. And just before we dive straight in, I want to remind you guys to please like and subscribe up to the channel. And if you've got something to say, please do drop it in the comments box below. Today's video is inspired by a comment left by Joe Malinowski on one of my stock music tutorials. Thank you, Joe, for the comment. It was on my folk composition. Joe was talking about the difficulty which he finds when multi-tracking a lot of real acoustic instruments onto MIDI instruments, particularly drums, and it's a really common issue, particularly with timing. So in today's video, I want to give you 3 top tips for how you can get MIDI and real instruments to work well together in your home studio and get awesome results. My first top tip is to lay down a really good scratch track before you even start thinking about MIDI. You start thinking about programming your drums or putting down other tracks. The first thing you got to do is lay down a great scratch track. And a really good scratch track performance might not necessarily be what first comes to mind when you think of a really good public performance. It doesn't have to be the most best vocal performance you've ever given. What it does need to be is in really good time. That's going to really help you when it comes to building up your MIDI tracks, particularly obviously your drum tracks and building your track up. But also, really importantly, that you highlight the accents and what's going to be going on in the production of your track. So if you require a drum build, if there's areas where there's stops, there's some dynamics going on in the music, you can really accent that out in your scratch track. And that's going to really help you as you start to build your track, particularly when you're building your drum track. That's going to give you some markers to show where those fills are going to go, where those builds are going to go, where the quiet bits are. The more you can accent in your scratch track at the early stages of laying down your track, the more production ideas you're going to have as you work through your piece. Tip number 2 is to build a solid foundation for your track. This is so important, guys. Your drums and your bass are really nice and solid. They are your building blocks, your foundation of your track. Without a really good foundation for your track, you're going to run into timing issues. This is going to be your bedrock. This is going to be your reference point for whether a piece that you've tracked is good enough, it's in time enough, and it's working with your track. So it's really important that foundation is solid. If you've ever tried to put a track together with a not so great drummer, then you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And more often than not, as you start layering and adding tracks, the whole thing just starts to fall apart. If you're manually programming your beats, then typically you're going to want to quantize those, make sure they're really nice and tight. When it comes to the bass, if you're performing it manually, then again, you want to really make sure that that bass line is really solid and locked into your drums. As I've been composing a lot more stock music compared to full songs these days, I actually find myself using MIDI bass, a free program like Ample Bass P, and I find that fantastic because I can get the bass locked in very quickly. I can quantize that bass line. It's very easy to manipulate and get a great sound and get very fast workflow. But if you want to, or indeed you are playing manual bass, then you just want to make sure that you really get that locked in. There's nothing wrong with going back over that bass. You can indeed quantize the bass if you want to. Don't be afraid to comp areas. Don't be afraid to cut and paste areas with the bass either. The most important thing is the song and the foundation of the song. How you get there really doesn't matter too much. The bottom line is you want the drums and the bass locked in. So my third top tip, and this comes to when you're actually layering the instruments. So say you've got acoustic guitar, say you've got some mandolin or ukulele or some banjo, and you're just layering up all those acoustic instruments. Now this is the area where I think you need to avoid the temptation of over quantizing. You may think, well, hey, that worked really well with the drums, that worked really well with the bass, we'll just keep everything really tight, keep on stacking it and quantizing. And this is where the artistry of recording really comes in. Quantizing, fantastic, but it needs to be done artistically. To overdo it and just to throw it and apply to everything is going to give you a very mechanical, unmusical, sterile recording, and you want some of that feeling and flavor from your performance. So this is where the timing really comes into play, and also you can really rely on the great timing foundation you've already set down in your drums and bass. If you're double tracking, take care with your strum patterns and try to get them locked in as best as possible. Again, here there's nothing wrong with comping your performance. If you found your third and fourth verses sound a lot better than the first and second and it's the same structure, there's nothing wrong with copy and pasting them and bringing them back into the first and the second verse. And indeed also, if you've got a performance and there's something that's a bit out of timing, there's nothing wrong with just cutting that piece out and then putting something else in to replace it from another part of the song. This is all of the beauty of the flexibility of digital recording, so take advantage of that. Again, what's important is to think of the overall piece, the overall recording and the song. What we're looking for is a piece that's really strong and tight, but also comes across musical and evokes emotion. If I had to leave you with one top tip when it comes to recording, producing, performing and mixing your song from your home studio and mixing up those MIDI instruments, be that drums, bass, synths, or a whole wealth of other MIDI instruments with your own acoustic and real instruments, it's to treat the whole process as you were a band and be flexible. If you come to the point where you put down your guitar, or even you're getting close to putting some overdubs or vocals, and there's an area of the song that just isn't working, don't be afraid to knock out that thing that's not working. If that's a drum part and it's just not happening, or there's a bit of guitar which just never felt quite right or in time, don't be afraid to edit that out, remove it, see how the song feels without it. Often I find being flexible like this, as a band would in a studio environment, can actually lead you down to a path to better edits and better production and a more interesting piece. So never be afraid to be flexible and play around with your track as you're developing the track in the home studio. With one person, it can be kind of difficult, so you can't be too set in your ways. Use those little obstacles and hurdles as actually opportunities to improve your production, often as it would happen if you were in a band working with a producer in a studio. I hope you found that video really useful today. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe up to Real Home Studio here on YouTube. Go check out realhomestudio.com. I've got a whole bunch of really cool courses for you guys you can check out right now, and a really awesome ebook with 7 ways of how you can start making money from your music right now. My name's Johnny Good for realhomestudio.com. Go have yourselves a great day.